You're an accepting Jew.
I do.
Good evening. Welcome back to In the Rabbi Study. This evening we have the joy of learning with Rabbi Bradley Shavit Artson. Brad is the dean of the Ziegler Rabbinical School at the American Jewish University and a professor of Jewish thought there as well, and a very, very dear friend. Brad is also the leading intellectual who teaches theology at the conservative movement and teaches Jews all around the world. Good evening, Brad. It's nice to have you together.
It's great to see you too, Eddie. Thanks.
So we've never had a moment like this. You can imagine the kind of consternation as we're trying to navigate a crisis which forces Jews apart. This is so different from the Jewish experience. So how are you and your students weathering this?
Well, on a technical level, it's meant a complete transformation. All of our classes are online. Excuse me. And people are emailing, Skyping, but I'll tell you the good that's come out of it. We did a school-wide gathering on Zoom yesterday with students here and in our Jerusalem campus together. And we started with song, and then we did some learning, and then I asked the students to identify what is it that they're afraid of at the moment, and then for each of them to offer the blessing that fear requires. And so it was extraordinary to have 30 some odd future rabbis blessing through their own needs, but really blessing each other. And I think that's the challenge right now is, can we take the exigencies of our time, the things we have to do because we're all hunkering down, and find blessing in it, find light that will help us get through and thrive, and then prepare for the time that's coming.
So what blessings have you found, and what were the extraordinary blessings your students suggested?
Well, one is a blessing of what we had to give up that I don't think we appreciated. So all these people who can't sit together, touch each other, have lunch together, in my family, going to synagogue on Saturday is a survival mode. And so to realize how valuable and precious community is and the blessing of having each other, we noticed in its absence. And so I'm hoping that when this is over, and it will end, that we'll walk back into that synagogue sanctuary with a sense of, oh my God, what a lifeline this is. What an incredible, precious treasure this is, and maybe not take it so for granted. And then in the interim, what I think about is I have elderly parents who don't live locally, and I'm able to see them and connect with them, and they have cause to worry. For people who are in compromised health positions, this is a dangerous time. But I'm able to have the consolation of a couple times a day just touching base, sending them a joke, sending them a recording, and we can do that. I have dear friends who moved to Jerusalem a month or two ago, and they're now in quarantine in their apartment. And we had a 45-minute chat today where we could see each other and sit together. And so to be able to reconnect and make it mindful, to deliberately reach out. I have some high school buddies who have organized a nightcap, but we're gonna do it on Zoom. So we're going to each bring our little nightcap, and we're going to sit tonight and hang out with people who I knew when I was 16, right? So that's the blessing of this time. Can we find ways that we connect and things that delight ourselves?
Wow. I think that's quite beautiful. I'm looking forward, frankly, to seeing how we come to understand how small a planet this is.
Yes.
I think that's another one of the lessons of the moment, because the whole thing came to be because of a butcher in Wuhan, China, who butchered an animal and sold it to somebody for their Friday night dinner. And 6 or 8 or 10 weeks later, the entire world economy comes crashing down.
Yeah.
The idea that we are knit together in such a close symbiosis, and that even though we're delighted to be proud in who we are and distinctive in our own convictions and our own identities, we can't say we're the only ones. We can't look totally within. The balance
Correct.
between a particularism and a universalism has to be reinterpreted.
And the beauty of that is a gift of this crisis, so this is a crisis that isn't political, it's not ideological, it's planet wide. So there was a cute thing this morning. I mean, cute is the wrong word, it actually touched me. Gal Gadot, who's one of my favorite actors on the planet, um, and a Wonder Woman in real life as she was on the screen, she put together a video on Instagram of famous celebrities, each locked in their own apartments or homes,
Hmm.
um, singing this remarkable folk song of hope and dream. And to see, I hadn't thought about it in advance, but to see people who have every privilege in the world, they have fame, they have wealth, they have whatever, and there they are stuck in their t-shirts in their apartments, just like we are in ours.
Hmm.
Um, and these were people from all over the world, every race, every lifestyle, every orientation, every nationality. We are now humanity.
Hmm.
And humanity glistens with our unique differences and also is rooted in our commonalities. And maybe if this can help us awaken to what that reality means, that you don't have to attend to the one at the expense of the other, and that we really are, as a species, standing together. That's something really extraordinary.
Brad, I suspect that many of our colleagues are going to be listening to this conversation. And in as much as you teach rabbis and you're well known in the community as a resource for so many of us, as we think about halachic issues and philosophical issues and as well as personal issues, what do you think rabbis need to know at this moment?
Well, I guess, with you as certainly a voice that all of us listen to and learn from, I'd want to say that our teacher, Harold Schulweis, has some wisdom for this time. And I learned it from Simon Greenberg, who was my Rabbi, a great rabbi's rabbi.
Yes.
He taught me the first time I was invited to speak to the rabbinical assembly, a room full of rabbis, I was appropriately petrified. And he said words that have stuck with me ever since. He said, when they're listening, they're not rabbis. So talk to them like people. And so the first thing I'd want to say to our colleagues is be human. Don't be the one who martyrs yourself. Think about what your reasonable needs are to take care of yourself, because this is going to be a long marathon. This is not a sprint. So find ways to renew and replenish and please yourself so that you have what to give to others. And then let's think about people's human needs and how those needs can be met. I love the fact that, in Jewish tradition, I know you know this, but I want to make sure that everyone listening, in Jewish tradition, public prayer requires the presence of 10 other Jews. But what do you do if you're not able to be in a room with 9 other people? Does that mean we don't have access to our liturgy and our songs and our prayers? There's a huge spiritual resource and we need it now. So the governing body of conservative Jewish law, the Committee on Law Standards, issued a ruling for an emergency time in which they said for during this period, electronic connection counts. And so if you can get onto a Zoom conversation or Skype or FaceTime, whatever, with 9 other praying people, then you have access to the full liturgical tradition. That seems to me to be a powerful symbol of what we need to do, which is to prioritize our human needs over ritual restrictions, and to be able to be sure that we mobilize the deep emotional wisdom of the world's traditions to be available for people as they need them. This is not a time for nitpicking.
I'm concerned that as this crisis moves forward, that the novelty that we feel at the very beginning of it, it's sort of snow day, we're off of school, yeah. People are out of work. The snow day novelty is going to wear off.
Yes.
And the crisis, the sense of crisis, the sense of things being profoundly broken is going to set in, and we're going to find it much more difficult. You're going to begin to see the sort of symptoms of PTSD when we get testy with each other,
Yeah, yeah,
when
yeah.
we begin to share anger as a way of sort of the fantasy of control is held when you get angry. So if you're losing real control, you by getting angry and chewing somebody out, you gain a fantasy of control. And then from anger, of course, following the steps of Kubler-Ross, you come to a sense of depression and sadness when you realize you can't control it. And at this point, it occurs to me that the important lesson here is a lesson of mitzvah. Very interesting idea. This week, the beginning of the crisis, everyone is nice to each other because we're nice to each other because there's a crisis and we should be kind. But as we get testy with each other, it's important to recognize that forgiving the other for their anger is a mitzvah. It's an obligation. It's a discipline. The woman who will cut me off in the line at the supermarket, or the gentleman who will say something unkind as we wait at the bank, we have to practice a discipline to remember that these are brothers and sisters who are sharing this crisis as we are, and they may be more emotionally vulnerable than we are. And we have to be able to share this discipline. So the idea of altruism as a discipline and not simply as a feeling. It's charity, tzedakah, chesed is a discipline and not simply as a feeling is going to be really necessary in the next stages of this crisis.
Crucial. There's a wonderful teaching, I forget if it's in the Midrash or in the Talmud, that says that what we remember, God forgets, and what we forget, God remembers. So there's a concept of holy forgetting, right? Which is God models for us, if you're aware of what you did wrong, then God says, okay, I'll forget it, right? You got it. You're covering it. And I think we have to practice holy forgetting, right? Just don't remember the slights. Don't remember the little insults, the little wrongs. Everybody is carrying a very heavy load and doing the best they can. And we'll all do better if we selectively learn how to forget. But the other thing I want to say is I think what you said that's so important is powerlessness, and the perception of powerlessness is a tool of the devil. So there are things we can't control. That is true. But in the midst of this crisis, there's a great deal we can do. So I thought of two things as you're speaking. One is there is a lot that's broken. And the coronavirus isn't breaking it. It's just revealing the brokenness. So let's use this time to keep a list of all the things in the way we deliver medical care, in the way we deliver compassion, in the way we reach out to people, in the way we take care of our neighbors. Let's keep a list of all the things that we now know are broken, and let's start the work of building consensus around fixing them, because we're not helpless for that. Our social structures are our choices. So let's start to attend to those. And then the second thing is our tradition, like many, counsels some kind of patience, some savlanut in the face of what we're not able to change, and being able to recognize our creaturely nature, being able to know that there are some things that we just have to accept and move on. That's the inner work. And so can we balance that? Can we affirmatively reach out to change what we can? Can we affirmatively practice the kind of grounding that allows us to endure what we can't change? Both of those, I think, are spiritual tasks.
That's lovely. Thank you. That's wonderful. And the other one that I would add to your beautiful words, the other one is simply this: is that we're learning how to use time in new ways. I think Americans are in general terrible in using time. That's why the culture has invested so deeply in distraction. I mean,
Yes.
if you think about this, the medieval city was capitaled with a cathedral because faith was at its core, and the modern city had the factory because industry was at its core, and the postmodern culture has the shopping mall with the Cineplex with 29 screens because distraction, entertainment is the core. And what's happened is all of the distractions have been removed from us.
Yeah.
Americans have no theaters, no bars, no restaurants, no sports to watch on television or to watch in person. So we're having to learn how to use time in new ways because you can't just grind it up and kill it with television and with sports. Even television and even internet becomes tedious after a while. And I'm wondering whether we'll learn how to read books again, God forbid, or to learn to
Right.
talk to each other in new ways, God forbid.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you. That's a really powerful insight and something to attend to. I guess I want to be contrarian here. Um, there are times where escapism is the wisest path, right? So, in a time where your fears threaten to overwhelm you and there's nothing you can do directly, a good fantasy is not a bad substitute. Um, and so I think again one of the blessings of the internet, if we use it constructively, is there are thousands of sitcoms and dramas and all sorts of things that allow us to lift our vision away from what we are stuck with, what we can't change. And that's not such a bad thing. You know, I'll just remind you, Rabbi, that books a couple hundred years ago were the internet of their time. You know, novels were not part of your formal education. You read classics for your formal education, and then you read a novel to like waste time. So, um, so I'm all in favor of productive wasting time. And I guess I'd want to add one other thing for all of us. The temptation, I think, is to sit in front of our screens endlessly. And here, as elsewhere, the opportunity is to be the masters of our tasks and not the slaves. So by all means, we should do our diligent work, but then at some point we should shut it off and do push-ups, do sit-ups, do yoga, do whatever it is to get us back into our bodies and get the blood pumping in our bodies, because that's going to also be important for the long haul. We are embodied creatures and we need to live in our body. And can I add one other big picture item?
Of course.
This coronavirus is also going to have enormous economic implications.
Absolutely.
We're already starting to see workers getting laid off. We're starting to see businesses topple and fall. And I have a sense that the biological part, the coronavirus, will come in cycles. We'll get a couple waves of that. And with each wave, there'll be more and more people who will have the antibodies, and it will just become part of our new normal, like the flu. But the other tidal wave that's coming at us is going to be economic hardship. And again, gearing up now to look out for each other, to create a culture of caring in which nobody gets lost and nobody falls through the cracks. We need to now start to think about how we do that. I'm very proud of the fact that a coalition of congregations, I think VBS was part of this coalition, has located a system for synagogues to find out who are the shut-ins who need help with their shopping, who are the people who need things delivered to their house, who needs medical supplies brought to their home or need to be brought to an emergency room. We need to become catalytic engines of care, because that tidal wave has just begun and it's going to get bigger and bigger before it gets better and better. And we need to be part of that.
Yes, that's it's very important. It's a very important notion. One last matter. I'm beginning to get many families questioning, what are we going to do for Passover? You
Yeah.
can't have the 18 or 20 members of the Artson clan at the table anymore.
No.
It's just going to be a very small group, and particularly for families of elderly folks who really need to stay away,
Right.
and shelter in place.
Right.
What wisdom shall we share with the community as they get ready for Pesach?
So Eddie, here's what I've been thinking about that, because like you, I'm also dealing with how do I take care of the relatives who won't be able to show up?
Right.
How do I not on Passover evening, when I sit at a table of maybe 3 or 4 or 5 people, how do I not feel what I'm not having?
Hmm.
And I have 3 thoughts. First is in the Talmud, it talks about how even if you're by yourself, you should recite the Haggadah, the story of the Exodus. And I think that I've never thought about that as more than just a rhetorical flourish, but now I'm thinking it's actually real. What does it mean to say, even though I'm by myself and I'm not with the people I would want to be with, what does it mean to say, I'm going to celebrate liberation? Because even Malone. And I think that's real. I want to encourage people in the strongest possible way to make room to do the Haggadah with whoever they can be with, even if that's just themselves. That some form of singing the songs you know, having the food you're familiar with, saying the blessings, we need to be prepared for freedom. I remember one of the life-changing teachings I learned from you, Eddie, was that the miracle of Passover wasn't the splitting of the sea or the plagues. It was the women packing the tambourines in the dreariest of times, because they knew that someday they'd have to dance again. And that teaching of yours has sustained me more times than I can mention. So I think that's number one, is celebrate Passover no matter who you are or are not with. 2, use electronics. If we can have a bunch of telephones on different people's tables so that we're all Skyping into each other's celebrations, let's do that. And let's sing with the people we love anyway. And then the final piece, and I can't help this, I'm both a philosopher and a rabbi, is that a teaching of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who you mentioned earlier, she noted that in the world of physics, in the physical world, space and time are unalterable realities. And you're either here or you're there. You're either now or you're then. But in the realm of spirit, that's not true. We can close our eyes and be in Jerusalem, San Francisco, New York, Toronto, and London instantaneously. And we can also be with those who we love, living and not living instantaneously. So I think this is also a time that there's a great Hasidic teaching that some truths you can only see with your eyes open, and some truths you can only see with your eyes closed. So this Passover, I want to invite us to hold on to both truths. Look around at all the blessings we do have that the coronavirus isn't taking away. We still have each other. We still have community. We still have resilience and hope and tremendous resources and people who we love and who love us. And then close our eyes and hold on to all the blessings you can only see with your eyes closed. You have a home in Jerusalem in your heart. You have the ability to hold your grandparents' arms in your heart. You have the ability to be with children who are no longer local but are living far away in your heart. So let's surround ourselves with those circles of love that are no less real just because you can't see them with your eyes.
That's a beautiful teaching. Thank you. And it occurs to me, too, that for so much of Jewish history, the act of opening the door at the end of the Seder was a dangerous thing to do. Because danger lurked outside. And yet we opened the door and we sing Eli Novi. We welcome hope into the house and back into our lives, even despite the dangers that are outside. Brad, thank you so very much.
My pleasure.
Your family good health and good strength.
Thank you. You too, Eddie. Thanks for the opportunity to connect.
And when the holiday comes, we'll wish you a sweet and happy Pesach. Stay well.
You also. Take care. Bye-bye.